we were talking about the ascension. Grant covered the resurrection for us while I was gone, and then my half of that was the ascension. And I don't remember if I said this or not. I think I did. It was in my notes. I don't know if I got that far or not. But I made this statement, and we had talked about, things that were important. And when we think about Jesus, Dwayne answered this right off the bat. And he said, when we think about that, we think about death, burial, and resurrection. And we do, and we should. And then I said, well, but there's four things. There's the ascension, and that's one of the things that we want to pass over and not talk about, not think about. And there's all kinds of different reasons for that. We shouldn't be scared of any of those things. But there's all kinds of reasons for that. But I mentioned that point to Todd this week. And I told it, and I think I made this, I'm not sure. I think I meant to, that I can't believe all of evangelical Christianity doesn't take up the ascension as a holiday. You understand? Did I say that in class? You remember? Dale said no. I don't think I did. It's just in my notes. But I was talking with Todd about that. And Todd goes, oh, but they do. And I'm like, what? He said, oh, but they do. What do you mean by that? He said, well, I was making a delivery, I think, he said, to an Amish place, and there was nobody there. And he found this guy, and they said, oh, there's nobody working today. And he said, why not? He said, it's a holiday. Todd said, what kind of holiday is it? The guy said, it's Ascension Day. Do what? I said, I've learned something. I'm going home. I'm going to do some study about that because I need to know some more about that. Now, it's not a big holiday like Christmas and Easter and those kinds of things. But it's, as we talked about on Wednesday, it's just as an important thing as the death, burial, and resurrection. It's part of that, the ascension. So when we think about that, and that's going to be hard for me. It's like doing memory work and it being in the King James, and you can never get that out of your head. So when you ask me about that, I'm going to always say, well, it's about the death, burial, and resurrection. But I've got to change my thinking. It's about the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension. And we talked some about that on Wednesday night. But there are other religious groups that celebrate that as a holiday. I didn't know that on Wednesday, but since Wednesday, I learned better. And even talked to Todd. He'd witnessed that very thing. Hey, that was new to him too. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody. But I'm going to go ask the people that I know who are part of religious bodies that are supposedly supposed to celebrate that. And I'm going to ask them. I got a feeling some of them will say, the ascension what? I don't know. But anyway, that's just something, I guess that's just something extra. That don't cost you anything this morning. But I thought that quite interesting. And so that's why I wanted to tell you that. Anyway, we're in lesson 11 this morning. And no, we're not. That was where I was. We're in lesson 12 this morning. Wonder why I wrote down 12 on my paper. We're talking about the kingdom of Christ. And here's how I want to... Well, wait just a minute. I want to start out with our memory verse. Our memory verse, we've said this each class when we started, is from Acts 3:18. It says, but the things which God announced beforehand by the mouth of all the prophets, that that's God's, Christ, should suffer, He has thus fulfilled. I'll tell you like I told you on Wednesday night, remember Christ, He's the Messiah, He's the anointed one, and He is our deliverer. And like I think I said on Wednesday night, if I didn't, I should have. One thing that I need is a deliverer. I think we all do. And I think we all can be in agreement about that. I want to start this morning by asking you a question. And you don't have to answer this question. You can if you want to. You don't have to. And nobody's going to get mad if you don't raise your hand. Here's the question. How many of you in here are citizens of the United States? I'm going to raise my hand. And if you didn't, that's fine. It's no big deal. Well, and that's good. Thank you. Well, I'm going to ask you another question. What does it mean to be a citizen of the United States? What does that mean? Or does it mean anything? You have what? You have the rights to be a citizen. I, I had that wrote down. It's on down on my paper. I wrote that down. That's correct. What kind of rights? Let's elaborate on that. What kind of rights do we have as a citizen? Oh, voting. Voting's what I put down first. Voting, freedom. We can participate in political party. We can run for office. Uh, Protection. I had that wrote down. Yeah. Protection from things that are against our laws. We have the freedom of speech. We have, as long as we have a passport or a real ID, which is hard to get, we can travel. We have Social Security benefits. Tom? Oh, that's an important one. We can worship. That's very important. And we don't have to be afraid that somebody's not going to come in that door or back there with guns and say, you better stop what you're doing. We don't have to worry about that. Did anybody, you got to answer this, did anybody were they scared this morning to come in here because they were afraid somebody would come in here and stop us? Now, the time may come when that happens, but that's not the country that we live in now. Yes.
Another aspect of that is we're not forced to practice a state religion.
That's right. We have the freedom, we have our freedom to choose those things. Now, let me just speak to that just a minute. And hopefully this is me and not you, and hopefully I'm not like this anymore. But sometimes we get the idea that if you don't agree with me, or if you're not part of my political party, or you don't see things my way, then me and you are going to be at odds against each other. Have you ever had that kind of thinking? But we're missing the point, aren't we? Just what you said, Rose. Nobody is forcing us to say, you have to do this. Nobody's forcing us. Nobody comes up and says, hey, you have to celebrate Ascension Day. Because then we're going to have a problem, aren't we? But they don't. Mike? Mike's article. If you want to know what Mike thinks about that, look in the article in today's bulletin. He's pro-choice. And that goes back to what Tom said. You know, we have the choice and we have the freedom. Here's a problem that I've developed sometime, and I think I'm over this now. Here's the problem that I've had before. If you choose the wrong things, I don't like you. Anybody ever felt like that? I don't see a head doing this. Has anybody ever felt like that? Oh, so now Rose, thank you. We can be that way. But here's what we got to remember. We're in a country where we have a choice. I think you see where we're going. I could ask the question, are any of you in here citizens of a kingdom? Oh, yes. Oh, did you want to say something? No. You're just saying you're a citizen of a kingdom. Yeah, we can all raise our hand. We're all citizens of a kingdom if we've done the proper things to enter that kingdom. You know, being part of a nation, it's a bond. It's something. Being part of a nation, it's a bond that we share. It's about, and sometimes we can get crosswise on this, but to be an American and to be a citizen of the United States was built on certain values, wasn't it? You remember, I don't know if they teach this in school now, but when I was in school, we taught those things. I can remember in school when it was a big deal that I don't know who it was that paid for it. I got a feeling some vein of the state paid for this. But I remember when the men came into the classroom, I was in the 4th grade. You know what? They hung this plaque up on the wall. You know what was on that plaque? The Ten Commandments. Now, we all know we're not under that rule. But what does that say about us as a country and in our schools? And I don't know whether you can hang those in the school. If I was in charge of the schools, you could hang that kind of stuff in the school. But at the same time, what I've got to remember is I don't like it. I don't like it personally when someone wants to worship the devil in our schools. And I would venture to say there's many people here who would agree with me about that. But the fact of the matter is they have those same rights that I do to worship and to practice. So as a Christian, I've got to understand that. And when we look at Jesus, we talked about everything that we're talking about this year. And I know everybody's going to get so sick of hearing about this. I hope not. But it's pointing to Jesus. And if we see Jesus in that, and we see how Jesus thought about those things, then that's going to make us better. It's going to make us better citizens of His kingdom. And you know what it'll do also? It'll make us better citizens of the United States, won't it? It'll make us better doctors and better lawyers and better mechanics and better checkout people at the grocery store. It'll make us better all the way around. It's a bond based on shared values. You know, equality under the law. But it signifies a commitment to those ideals of the nation, doesn't it? It really does. We see the people on the news. I'll just tell you, I don't watch the news much anymore. If you watch the news, that's fine. I get all my news on the radio, so it's not much, but it's about all I need. You know, if somebody hadn't told me, I wouldn't have even known there was bombing going on. But you know what? I can't do anything about it. I can still be the best Christian that I can be, and I can pray about those things, but I can't control that. I can't do anything about that. But though the ideals that the nation has, here's one. Did I mention Social Security benefits? Did I mention that already? I did? No? Somebody saying yes, somebody saying no. Well, that's part of what we get that too. I don't yet, probably be gone by the time I get there. But that's just how that is. But we've got responsibilities as citizens to obey the laws. We got a responsibility to do something none of us want to do, and that's pay taxes. Unfortunately, that's just the way that is. We've got the responsibility to defend the nation. We've got the responsibility to serve on juries. We've got the responsibility really to keep ourselves informed about what's going on about the nation that we're part of, don't we? We really do. Jack? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Right. No, that's right. Absolutely. Those things and those precepts, that's one thing this quarter has pointed us. It has connected the old and the new more than I think any study I believe I've ever done. Would you agree with that, Grant? I think so. I mean, I'm not meaning to put words in your mouth, but things we've talked about, I mean, it just so much goes together. Well, when we think about the kingdom of Christ, and our keynote text is Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. I want to read those, and let's listen to those, and let's don't pass over. I can't stress the importance that it is to us to be about the business of reading our Bibles. I'll tell you, some of you have heard me say this before. If you read something and you don't understand it, I'll give you another tip about that. If you read something and you don't understand it, put it down, wait till the next day and read it again. And I'll give you another tip about that. If you read something and you don't understand it, let me ask you to do this. Stand up. Stand up and take your Bible and read it. But don't just stand up. Stand up and read it out loud. Stand up and read it out loud in a mirror. Stand up and read it and read it and reread it. And a lot of times, it'll come to you what the meaning of those verses are. That's just something that might help us in our Bible reading. If we go to Isaiah 9, beginning in verse 6, we'll read 2 verses. It says, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful. It'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal, Father, Prince of Peace." Verse 7 continues, "There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore." Now let's stop right there. I know there's more to that verse. We'll talk about that in a minute. Well, Isaiah declares what we just read. That's what he's, and we look at that in the book of Isaiah. I think every verse that we're going to talk about this morning, we've already discussed before in some way, fashion, or form. I believe that's without question. Well, who this is referring to, it's referring to Christ. Isaiah says that the government will rest on his shoulders. He is going to be a ruler from the family of David, but not just any ordinary descendant of David. Notice in verse 6, it says, "His name will be called." Well, we could question or quiz ourselves and say, well, what difference does it make in what our name is? We've talked about before in this class about people. How many little boys do you know that are named Judas? I don't think anybody had ever met one. There's a reason for that. There's something in a name. Well, what's in a name? Well, look at the names that are attributed to the Messiah, because it's his kingdom that we're learning about. The first thing is Wonderful Counselor. Wonderful. That means supernatural or extraordinary. In the Old Testament, it was associated with God. Well, let me ask you a question, or let's ask ourselves this question. Have any of us ever sought counsel? Has anybody? You don't have to raise your hand. Has anybody in here ever sought counsel from anyone? I have. I have. Well, what's the folly of that? Let me say, there's nothing wrong with seeking counsel. You understand? But what's the folly in it? They're human. Where is? Let me make sure I ask the question. What? Sometimes when we seek counsel, what is the background of the counselor that we sought? Does that matter? Of course. Why does it matter? They have expertise in what you're asking about. That's right. And I'll give an illustration of that. I knew a couple long time ago who was having some marital trouble, and they sought counseling. And they sought 2 Christians to counsel them. That they had I can't think of the word. They had the what? They had the credentials. Yeah, that's what it is. They had their credentials. They could do that. And they knew from a Christian standpoint. They knew what the Bible said. And then they had the documents to say that they were qualified. And then they gave unbiblical advice and tore a family apart. Now, they were humans, but how sad that is. When Rose?
My study Bible has a nice note for defining what counselor means here.
Mm-hmm.
Is one who is able to make wise plans. He is a ruler whose wisdom is beyond merely human capability.
Mm-hmm.
So he's extra special.
Just think about this. Let's say you go up here on Broadway and you rented an office space and you hung that out on the shingle. They'd be lined all the way out to I-65 out there down Scottsville Road. waiting to get in there. Wouldn't they? Because you can't beat that. The human advice is lacking spiritual wisdom, even when we know it. But not Jesus. Not our King. He's not like that. It also called Him a mighty God. That tells us about something we've talked about in this class before this quarter. And what is that? Just one word. What does it tell us about Christ? He's what? Emmanuel. He's deity. That's the word I wrote down. He is deity. He is deity. Some people say that these are just normal, ordinary titles or description, but they're not. They're not. The next description is eternal Father. What kind of Father? It tells us what kind. What kind? Eternal. Our Messiah, our deliverer, is an eternal Father. He is never going to go away. Does that matter? Absolutely. Who said that? Rose? Why does that matter? Or let me ask a two-part question. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Uh, and I guess what does it mean to us? What does it mean for us? Answer. You, Rose, you got it. Yeah, I just put it in your lap.
It matters because he's the one that was promised throughout.
Mm-hmm.
He's become, the rock, the foundation. He's Paul used different metaphors. He's the cornerstone. He's the roof. He's the foundation.
Right.
He's the building. The one that we can count on. Here's another note in that same text that talks about the everlasting Father. Father is a benevolent protector, which was the task of an ideal king. He's our ideal king.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the way God Himself cares for His people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as a father, and I'm a father, as a father, there's nothing that I wouldn't do. You think there's nothing that I wouldn't do to protect my child. And those of you in here who are fathers or grandfathers, I believe we could be in 100% agreement in that. I don't see any heads shaking like this. He will always be there. He will always be there. It also tells us that He is a Prince of Peace. We sing the song. How many of you know the song, Prince? Don't worry, I ain't going to sing that. Prince of Peace, control my will. We ever listen to the words of that song? Prince of Peace, control my will. Man, that could be our prayer. It's a prayer song. Prince of Peace, control my will. My will needs control. I don't know about y'all's, but my will needs controlling an awful lot. They could work overtime controlling my will. And you can decide that about your will. Well, if He's the Prince of Peace, peace must characterize the Messiah. And that's a good thing. Peace, sometimes we hear the Hebrew word. What's the Hebrew word for peace? You know it? What? Shalom. Rose, you're answering every question. No, that's all right. Other people did too. Yeah, the word shalom. Our Jewish folks, they use it as a greeting or when you meet or when you depart. But it's more than a greeting, isn't it? Peace or shalom, that's more than a greeting. That's more than that. Prince of Peace. It's more than that. Prince of Peace. I know a man. He's a Christian, and when people would describe him to me, that had known him a lot longer than I. He'd known me a lot longer than I remember him, because he remembers me from the time that I was born. But when people described him, here's how they described him. They said, he's a prince of a man. He is a prince of a man. Do you understand what that means? He's just a prince of a man. I know what that means because I knew what this man was and what he stood for. And he was a prince of a man. Well, the root meaning of the word shalom is to be whole or wholeness. or soundness or healthy or well-being. Well, here's a question. Is peace the absence of trouble? Donna? That's right. Donna said, according to the world, that may be a worldly definition, but we're different because the peace that we have is different from that, and that's so true. Um, uh, it is the fact what Donna is talking about. The peace that we have is the presence of God. You didn't say those words, Donna, and I'm not trying to put those words in your mouth, but that's what you're talking about, isn't it? It's the presence of God. Well, keep your hand in Isaiah, and let's look over to John the 14th chapter. In John the 14th chapter, and one thing that I have really liked about all this study, and me and Grant have talked about this, is the fact of it is how it links so many things together. And I believe that I've learned more about Jesus throughout this study. And I can only see that as good. And if I didn't help you with any of that, then that's on me. That's my fault. But hopefully through your own study, and I don't have to even wonder, because I sat in Grant's classes and he taught me lots of things. And for that I'm so appreciative. But he helped me to see Jesus. I have still remembered him talking about Jesus as being when we talked about him riding in on the donkey, the beast of burden, and Jesus being our beast of burden. I cannot get that out of my mind. And that's one of the things that when we partake of the Lord's Supper, that's one of the things now that I think about, and my mind goes to that almost every time. I cannot, and that's good. That I don't need to shake that. But in John the 14th chapter, verse 27, Jesus spoke these words. He said, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your heart," this is what he was telling his disciples before he was getting ready to leave. "Let not your heart be troubled, nor let it be fearful." Jesus spoke those words. They're words of comfort shortly before his death, right to his disciples that had been right there with him. Now, we talked about that a little on Wednesday night. They were sad. They were upset. They were nervous about that. But then here comes along the ascension, and then what was the demeanor of them after that? You remember? They were what? They were joyful. They were joyful. They didn't know everything yet, but they weren't sad. They were coming to understand, and Jesus, through his revelation, would soon begin their journey. It is only, and this is information for the world as well as us, it is only when we're at peace with God that we will ever have peace with others on this earth. That's the only way that will happen. I heard somebody say the other day in talking with another, they said, it doesn't matter what the problems are. Doesn't matter what the problems are, whether they're in the world, whether they're in the church, wherever they are. When we practice and we act like this book tells us, are we going to have a problem? No. There ain't going to be no more problem. That's I heard some young people before talk about in school when the teacher would ask them what the answer was, and they'd say Jesus, and she'd say, "No, that's not right." And their response was, "Are you telling me Jesus ain't the answer? Because Jesus is the answer." Now he's not the answer in algebra, but he's the answer no matter what the problem is. That's just the fact of the matter. I want you to notice, flip back to Isaiah. Notice in verse 7, this kingdom will be established and upheld. Notice the word justice and righteousness. Now, those two things were of extreme importance to these 8th century prophets. They just were. The emphasis of the importance of that fact is that the kingdom, as we've already said, would be never ending. Think about that. Think about that. Isaiah wasn't just thinking about another regular old king. He wasn't just talking about just a run of the mill, another king on the list. He was talking about the King of Kings. He wasn't just talking about just another king in Israel. He was talking about the final king. That means there wouldn't be any more. The king to end all kings. That's who he's talking about. Let's flip over the New Testament for a minute to Matthew chapter 4. In Matthew chapter 4, beginning verse 12. Matthew chapter 4, beginning verse 12. It said, and listen to this. This is what was allowed to take place. For those of y'all who wasn't here on Wednesday night, you missed my PowerPoint presentation. Those of you who are laughing were here and saw it. And Andy did all of it. He did it all. It was just an exclamation mark on the board. I can't do that, but he did. I was proud, even though I had nothing to do with it. But that's what the ascension was. It was the exclamation point. So what we can learn from that, and that's what began. That's what allowed all this stuff to start. So when we think about that, and I quiz and wonder what it would have been like, and we talk about that before. What would it have been like to have been sitting there with Jesus? What would it have been like? And I ask you to use the PowerPoints of your mind and to project yourself back there to think about what if you were there? You know, and the two men robed in white, and they watched him go up into the cloud. What would that have been like? But that's what allowed everything to begin. That's what allowed Pentecost Day to begin. That's what allowed the ministry of Jesus to begin. That's what we're fixing to read about in just a minute. But when we think about, I've thought more about that exclamation mark. And if I had to make another PowerPoint presentation, I would have 2 slides. One would have an exclamation mark, and one would have a question mark. And if we project ourselves into that, and we project ourselves into the story of Jesus, and we put Jesus into our lives, and we act like Him, then when we get to the end of our lives, we can put an exclamation mark. What I am so afraid of is that we will get to the end of our life. And I base this on this. I base this on talking to older individuals. And I'm not singling any of y'all out because y'all ain't older. I'm talking about them really old people they ain't in here. You know what I'm talking about. But they come to the end of their life with a question mark. But the kingdom that we're talking about, the kingdom that Christ set up, the kingdom that He is the ruler over, the kingdom that His ministry was all about, the kingdom that, like Dwayne told us, you know, when I asked the question, does God need anything? And we want to automatically say, God doesn't need anything. Yes, He does. Dwayne answered that question for us. He needs us. He needs us to carry out His ministry. He cannot do that alone. That's where we become involved in. So when we go to the book of Matthew and we look at chapter 4, beginning in verse 12, it says, now when he heard that John had been taken into custody, he withdrew into Galilee, and leaving Nazareth, he came and settled in Capernaum, which is by the sea in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. We talked about that before. Saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who were sitting in darkness saw a great light. And to those who were sitting in the land and shadow of death, upon them a light dawned. Notice verse 17. From that time, Jesus began to preach and say, Repent, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. What caused that to happen? If you write in your Bible, and I'd suggest you do, I used to believe you shouldn't write in the Bible, but I changed my mind a long time ago about that. But I wrote this in my Bible. If you want to know what caused that to happen, go to Isaiah 9 and verse 7, what we just read. Jack. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. That's right. And we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about that. And we're looking to see when it's coming. It is upon us. It's upon them. If we were there with them, it's upon them. We're going to look at John 18 a few verses in a few minutes. Another thing that makes me think about the exclamation mark, and go ahead, Brian. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Right. A- Mhm. Yeah, that's hard because the kingdom of Christ is an absolute monarchy. Listen to what I said. The kingdom of Christ is an absolute monarchy. That means, Keith, that's right. And that's the difference. That is the difference. In John 18, but did somebody say? Let me tell you what I was going to tell you. It's about 9 days ago. I talked to a man. He's an older man. He was a member of the. He was a faithful. He's a member of the church, but he's unfaithful. And he talked about there were 5 of them. I don't know how many brothers and sisters, but there was a group of all of them. He said our parents, we had one set of clothes, and that was our Sunday go to meeting clothes. That was what we wore to church, and they took us, and we learned. And he said, and he's the only way I know how to describe it, he said, well, the preacher always, he said, he was like one of those hellfire and brimstone preachers. You know what? Look at that. I didn't have anything to do with it. Andy, man, he's a miracle worker. He can do what? Yeah, yeah. I'm feeling good about myself. But he said, he said, I always got the idea. You know what a hellfire and brimstone preacher is? I like those kind of preachers. I don't know that they did the church a lot of good, but at times we needed that, and at times I need that. But he said, I always got the idea that God was mad at me. And he said, neither me nor my brothers and sisters, none of us are faithful today. And I said, well, he's not a bad, human being. You understand what I mean? He is not a bad human being. But he said, I thought God must be so mad at me for all the bad things that I did. And I tried to talk to him about the King of our kingdom, who's Jesus. And Jesus, I was talking with somebody else this week about meeting the woman at the well. And the thing that I love about that story is that he took her right where she was. And a lot of times that's where all of us are. We're somewhere out there. I heard of another man this week who won't attend assembly of the saints because he is afraid. He is afraid that he would be viewed as a hypocrite. He is afraid that he would be ostracized. Ladies and gentlemen, that's on us. That's on us because that's not the Jesus that we serve. That's not the King of our kingdom. In John 18, verse 36, and let's back up to verse 33. We know this story. We've gone over it several times. We know the background. Pilate, therefore, entered again into the Praetorium and summoned Jesus and said to him, Are you the King of the Jews? And Jesus answered, Are you saying this on your own initiative, or did others tell you about me? Pilate answered, I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests delivered you up to me. What have you done? And Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting that I might not be delivered up to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. Notice that those verses, especially verse 34 to 36, they give us key information about Jesus being a king. He's the kind of king that Keith was talking about. He's a king that has all authority. You know, it may be, if me or Keith, I'll just throw you in here, Keith. If me or you were the king, you know, we probably impose, I'm probably going to get this wrong, Keith. If Keith was a king, you might impose that everybody be a UK basketball fan. Did I get that right? Oh, I'm a little off on that one. Everybody has to ride bicycles. Now, I'm out of that kingdom. You can look at me. I'm a eater, not a rider. Unless it comes to fighting, then I'm a runner. I may can get with you on that one, but Keith will outdo me on that. But yeah, everybody has to have a bicycle. But as we talked about it before, the Jews are saying he claimed to be the king. Well, if in fact he claimed to be the Messiah, then he was in fact claiming to be the promised king of Israel. Well, if we turn back to John, the first chapter, just turn back a few pages. In John, the first chapter, that same book, verse 49, it says, Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. That's what he said. Now, look back over to 45. Wait a minute. Let's see. Uh, well, Pilate, what I want to say is Pilate's only care is that Jesus was guilty or innocent of rebellion against Rome. That's his only care. That's his only thought. Pilate needed only to look at Jesus, and he knew that he wasn't a threat to Rome. He knew that. I feel confident that he knew that. He knew that. But he sold out, didn't he? He was a sellout. And he did that because he knew that consequences would be in order for him. Yes, Mike. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. We'll talk some more about that on Wednesday evening. We'll stop right there. Class is over. Thank you, Mike, for those comments. Thank to every one of you for your comments. But we'll talk some more about that on Wednesday evening.